Episode 46 ended on May 5th at 5:22 in the afternoon. 9 hours of continuous lava fountaining, fountains reaching 650 feet above the crater floor, an ash plume climbing to 20,000 feet above sea level, volcanic debris falling across overlooks inside Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, a stretch of Highway 11 shut down, and then, abruptly, it stopped. That is the pattern that has defined Kilauea since December 23, 2024. Brief, intense episodes of lava fountaining, a pause of 1 to 3 weeks, and then it happens again, 46 times now. And here is the historical detail that gives episode 47 unusual scientific significance. Episode 47, assessed by the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory as likely within the May 12th to May 17th window, will tie a record that has stood for nearly 40 years. The Pu'u'o'o eruption of 1983 to 1986 produced 47 episodes of high lava fountaining before the system fundamentally changed its behavior. That eruption is in the scientific literature as one of the most significant volcanic sequences in Kilauea's documented history. The current eruption is 1 episode away from matching it, and the data the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory is collecting right now, tiltmeter readings, SO2 emission rates, seismic tremor patterns, is telling scientists something specific about where this system stands as it approaches that threshold. This is not a prediction. This is not an alarm. It is an analytical briefing on what the instruments are showing, what the historical record says, and why episode 47 carries analytical weight that goes beyond the number itself. Before we begin, if you genuinely enjoy what we do here at Global Faultline, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss updates as this situation develops. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and consider this. The USGS has been able to forecast the onset window of each episode of this eruption using tiltmeter data, a capability that did not exist at this precision during the 1980s. That means scientists can see this system approaching episode 47 in real time, with instruments that no previous comparable eruption ever had monitoring it. What those instruments are documenting right now is scientifically significant. Kilauea is erupting from 2 vents inside Halemaʻumaʻu crater at its summit. The north vent and the south vent sit within Kilauea, the summit caldera, entirely within the boundaries of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. The eruption began on December 23, 2024. Since then, it has followed a remarkably consistent pattern. Magma accumulates in the shallow storage system beneath the summit. Tiltmeters, instruments that measure the angle of the ground surface to sub-milliradian precision, record the inflation as the ground deforms upward under the pressure of rising magma. When inflation reaches a threshold, the system releases. Lava fountaining begins, sometimes within hours of precursory overflows from the vents. The episode runs for somewhere between 5 and 40 hours. The eruption ends. Tiltmeters record deflation as magma drains back down. And then, within days, inflation begins again. The USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory has used this tiltmeter data to forecast the onset window of each episode. It is a form of predictive monitoring that is genuinely unusual in volcanology. Most volcanic systems do not provide this kind of readable, repeatable signal. Kilauea's current behavior is, in the words of HVO scientists themselves, erupting in unprecedented detail. As of the most recent USGS update, the Uekahuna tiltmeter recorded approximately 14 microradians of deflationary tilt during episode 46. Since the episode ended, inflationary tilt has resumed. 6.9 microradians recorded in the first day of the current pause. Seismic tremor continues at the summit, with bursts every 1 to 10 minutes, associated with gas pistoning in the vents. SO2 emissions are running in the typical inter-episode range of 1,000 to 5,000 tons per day. The system is refilling. Based on current data, episode 47 is assessed by HVO as likely within the May 12th to May 17th window. That window may shift as the rate of inflation evolves. Does that refilling represent a system on a stable, repeating cycle that will continue to produce similar episodes indefinitely? Or does the approach to a historically significant episode count indicate something analytically different about the state of the underlying magma system? Based on currently available data, that question is what the monitoring community is actively working to characterize. The number 47 is not arbitrary. The Pu'u'o'o eruption began on January 3, 1983, from fissures on Kilauea's East Rift Zone. Over the following 3 years, it settled into a pattern of episodic high lava fountaining, brief, intense episodes separated by multi-week pauses. Episodes 4 through 47, as documented in the USGS scientific record, averaged 12.9 hours in duration and were separated by inter-episode periods averaging 26.5 days. The lava fountains during that sequence reached as high as 510 meters, nearly 1,700 feet. The Pu'u'o'o cone itself, built from the accumulated tephra and lava of those episodes, reached its maximum height during episode 43 and maintained it through episode 47. And then, in July 1986, after episode 47, the system changed. Episode 48 began not from Pu'u'o'o, but from new fissures at its base. Those fissures were active for just 21 hours. A third fissure opened 3 kilometers downrift on July 20th. That fissure evolved into a single vent, named Kupi'anaha, and the eruption shifted from episodic high fountaining to near continuous, relatively low-level effusion. The eruptive style that had defined 3 years of spectacular activity ended. Something structurally different took over. Published volcanological research on episode 49. The first episode after the transition describes it as the breakdown of a steady-state eruptive era. Not a larger eruption in the same style, but a fundamental reorganization of how the system was delivering magma to the surface. This is the documented historical analog that sits immediately behind the current eruption as it approaches episode 47. Does the current eruption's approach to this episode count indicate that a similar transition is possible? Or does the different location, summit rather than East Rift Zone, and the different monitoring capability make direct comparison analytically misleading? Both of those questions are ones the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory is actively tracking. The historical record provides context. It does not provide certainty. This is not a forecast of what episode 47 will produce. It is an identification of why the episode count itself carries scientific weight. The monitoring architecture around Kilauea's current eruption is, by any documented measure, the most sophisticated ever applied to a comparable volcanic sequence. During the Pu'u'o'o eruption from 1983 to 1986, HVO operated with the instrumentation available at the time. Seismometers, ground deformation surveys conducted periodically in the field, limited gas measurements. The USGS itself notes that the current eruption is being documented with capabilities that did not exist during the comparable historical sequence. Real-time tiltmeters, satellite thermal data, continuous SO2 flux measurements, and live webcam streams that allow round-the-clock visual monitoring of the vents. That instrumentation density matters for what it is revealing about this system's behavior. as it approaches episode 47. The tiltmeter data shows that the current refilling cycle, the return of inflationary tilt following episode 46, is proceeding at a rate consistent with recent episodes. That consistency is itself analytically informative. A system whose refilling rate is stable and repeatable suggests that the magma supply from depth is also stable and repeatable. The plumbing is working the same way it has been working for 5 months. The SO2 emission rate in the inter-episode period, 1,000 to 5,000 tons per day, is within the range documented across previous pauses. SO2 is a direct proxy for the amount of fresh, gas-rich magma degassing from the shallow storage system. A stable SO2 flux in the pause period is consistent with the system maintaining a relatively constant magma supply rate. The seismic tremor bursts, occurring every 1 to 10 minutes associated with gas pistoning in the vents, are described by HVO as typical of the post-episode period. Over the past day, those tremor bursts have become longer with more gradual onsets. That shift is noted specifically in the most recent HVO update. Whether it represents a transition toward the next episode's onset or simply a normal variation in the gas pistoning cycle cannot be determined from this observation alone. The East Rift Zone and the Southwest Rift Zone, the two other major structural features of Kilauea that have produced some of the most destructive eruptions in the island's history, including the 2018 Lower East Rift Zone eruption that destroyed more than 700 homes in Leilani Estates, currently show low rates of seismicity and ground deformation. That is an important observation. Based on current data, there is no indication that the current summit eruption is migrating into either rift zone. The instruments are telling a specific story, a stable repeating system approaching a historically significant episode count, with no current indicators of rift zone involvement. That story is analytically coherent. What it does not provide within the current limits of volcanic science is a guarantee that the system will continue to behave identically on its 47th iteration. There is a category of question in volcanology that the tiltmeter cannot answer. The tiltmeter tells you when the ground is inflating. It tells you the rate of inflation. It allows HVO to forecast the window within which the next episode is likely to begin. That is a genuinely powerful observational capability, and it is one that has made the current eruption one of the most successfully forecasted volcanic sequences in the documented record. What the tiltmeter cannot tell you is what happens at the vent during the episode itself. Episode 44 in April 2026 was described by HVO scientists as a quieter episode in the context of this cycle. Fountain heights reached approximately 800 feet. Tephra ranged up to 12 inches in diameter at nearby locations. The episode lasted approximately 8.5 hours. Episode 46, just 4 days ago, reached 650-foot fountain heights. The ash plume climbed to 20,000 feet. The seismographic record ran for the full 9 hours of the episode. The variation between episodes in fountain height, in tephra output, in plume altitude, is not fully predictable from the pre-episode inflation data alone. The tiltmeter tells you the system is ready. It does not tell you how energetically the system will release. The USGS itself notes that hazards can change sometimes over minutes. That observation from the agency that operates the most sophisticated volcanic monitoring system in the United States captures the analytical gap that exists between what the instruments can forecast and what the episode will actually produce. For episode 47 specifically, this gap carries a particular kind of weight, not because the instruments are showing anything anomalous. Based on current data, they are not. but because a system approaching a historically documented transition point in a sequence that has already produced 46 episodes of variable intensity is precisely the context in which that gap between forecast and outcome becomes analytically significant. This is not a prediction that episode 47 will be more energetic than episode 46. It is an observation that the current data does not exclude that possibility, and that the historical context of this episode number is one the monitoring community is tracking specifically. All 46 episodes of the current eruption have remained confined to Halemaʻumaʻu crater and the southwest side of Kilauea. Lava flows have not left the summit caldera. No residential communities have been threatened by lava during this eruptive sequence. That confinement is the critical distinction between the current eruption and Kilauea's most destructive recent episode. In 2018, the Lower East Rift Zone eruption sent lava flows through communities in Leilani Estates and Lanapuna Gardens. More than 700 homes were destroyed. Approximately 2,500 people were displaced. The eruption covered 13.7 square miles in lava and added approximately 875 acres of new land to the Big Island coastline. The current eruption is a fundamentally different event in terms of its impact on populated areas. This is not a qualification added for legal or institutional reasons. It is an accurate description of what the data shows. The hazards that the current eruption does produce, tephra fallout, volcanic gas emissions, ash plumes reaching aviation altitudes, are real and documented. Fist-sized volcanic glass fragments have been reported at the Wekahuna Overlook and along Highway 11. SO2 emissions at 1,000 to 5,000 tons per day produce VOG, volcanic air pollution, that drifts downwind and poses documented respiratory risks, particularly for children, pregnant individuals, and anyone with existing respiratory conditions. Aviation authorities track the ash plume in coordination with the Washington Volcanic Ash Advisory Center. These hazards are being managed through established protocols. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park coordinates access restrictions with HVO in real time. Highway closures are implemented and lifted based on tephra conditions. The Civil Defense Agency for Hawaii County is in continuous contact with HVO about eruptive hazards. The question of whether episode 47 produces tephra fallout and in what volume and what direction depends on fountain height and wind conditions at the time of the episode. Based on current data, neither of those variables can be precisely forecast ahead of the episode onset. What can be said is that the park and highway authorities have demonstrated the capacity to respond to tephra events within the time frame of recent episodes, and that the monitoring systems in place will provide the earliest possible indication of episode onset. This is global Faultline. Kilauea is refilling. The tiltmeters are recording inflationary ground deformation. Seismic tremor continues at the summit, and somewhere between May 12th and May 17th, based on current data, episode 47 of this eruption will begin. When it does, it will tie the historical episode count of the Pu'u'o'o fountaining sequence from 1983 to 1986, a sequence that ended not with a larger version of what had come before, but with a fundamental reorganization of how the volcano was moving magma. Whether the current eruption is approaching a similar inflection point, or whether the summit location and different system geometry make that comparison inapplicable, is an open analytical question the monitoring community is actively tracking. The instruments are running. The USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory is monitoring this system in real time with a level of observational capability that no previous comparable eruption has had, and the data those instruments produce over the coming days will continue to refine the picture of where this system stands. This analysis is based on currently available USGS data and does not represent a prediction of future volcanic activity. For the most current information on Kilauea's status, the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory updates are the authoritative source. If you're watching from the Big Island or anywhere across the Pacific, tell me in the comments, and tell me this: a volcano that can be forecast 4 to 7 days in advance using tiltmeter data represents one of the most remarkable monitoring achievements in modern volcanology. But the forecast tells you when, not what. Given that gap between timing and intensity, what do you think matters more for communities living near an active volcanic system? Drop that in the comments. I read everyone.